Hey drummers, hope you're well. Shout out to superstar drum student Gary, who was working on this today. This is the main groove from sort of intro for the Flaming Lips, Race for the Prize. This was played by Stephen Droyzed, is he called, I think. I think I'm right in saying it was him playing it. I could be wrong, but it's a brilliant drum part. What I love about this is if it's a kind of grade one thing, but there's a bit of musical interest in there. So basically, if you're starting off playing the drums, or you're at that grade one sort of level, this is a nice little challenge, I would say, but within reach, I would say, for the grade one drummer, and it's at quarter note feel. So at its heart, it's something really straightforward. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. A quarter note feel. Your hi-hat is playing quarter notes or crotchets. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way without fail. And the snare drum is playing what we call a backbeat, of course, 2 and 4. Again, all the way without fail. So your hands all the way through this basic version of the groove, should say, of course, like most or like a lot of drum parts, it changes quite a bit and there's variations. But we're looking at the core groove here, assuming you're like a grade one, type of drummer or drummer starting out. The hands without fail play 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All the way through without any changes. The thing of musical interest, I would say, where all the movement comes from is the bass drum, the kick drum part. Goes like this. Like I say, at least in the core version, it does. So there's various ways of going about this. One quite fun way to go about it is just to try playing it by ear. In particular, at first, you could take the hi-hat part away. And Gary was doing this in his session today. In fact, just really get to know and make friends with a little bit that slightly funky bass drum part. So you've got kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. That's the main phrase, man. One at the end. Bom, 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 So that's the main kick and snare feel going all the way through. And sometimes it's a good idea, especially when you're starting out, to just say, look, let's get a feel for this. Don't get me wrong, I love counting. We'll get into that in a second. And reading the music and all that stuff is great and an awesome way to learn. But let's not forget and overlook the feeling, the blooming thing as well. Boom, ga, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ga, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba. Bum, bum, ba, bum, a classic musical phrase that you hear all the time between kick and snare, and is definitely not just, specific to this tune. You just hear it all over the place. One time again. And with the hi-hat. So when you add in the hi-hat, I would say for the grade one drummer or the drummer starting out, this is where it gets a bit more coordinated, isn't it? Now, when you play quarter notes on the hi-hat like this, it's funny, but something I've noticed sort of doing this job quite a lot, and I can relate to this from when I first started learning as well. Funnily enough, when you're playing not as many notes on the hi-hat, it can make things more tricky in a funny way, because when you're playing a bass drum part like that, sometimes the bass drum is going to sync up with your hi-hat hit, and sometimes it's going to go in between your hi-hat hits. Like I say, funnily enough, when you're playing eighth notes, which a lot of beginners do as well, or perhaps even do more of, when you're playing those eighth notes on your hi-hat, so I've got a really squeaky seat, and I promise I'll get some WD-40 on it. So when you're playing eighth notes on the hi-hat, it's almost a bit simpler in a way, isn't it? Because for each hit of the hi-hat, you're saying, right, does the bass drum play with this or not? There's no in between the hi-hat. And when you break it down to quarter notes, what's funny is, like I say, sometimes it's with the hi-hat, sometimes it's in between. So although you're not playing as many notes, the coordination from one perspective might be a bit more tricky. I get that. Let's build it up. So it's a 2-bar phrase. The first bar has a bass drum on beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, Now the next bit is beat 3. This has 3 and. This is where it gets a little bit funky for the grade 1 drummer, I reckon. The first kick is with the hi-hat, and the second kick on the and of beat 3 is in between the hi-hats. Just to be super clear, you don't change what you play with your hands here at all. It's the bass drum that drops in between. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2. You with me so far? So 1, 2, 3, and last time, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So when you do 3 and, that's the moment, right? First one is with the hi-hat and is in the gap. There used to be, for people who did the previous Trinity Rock and Pop syllabus, there was Green River, wasn't there, by Creedence Clearwater, was that? And the main groove was... And then it went to the ride, right? Classic grade 1 coordination with that little kick, like in between the quarter notes on the hi-hat and the ride. There's also a bass drum at the end of the first bar on what we might call the and of beat 4. That gives us the whole of the first bar. 1, 2, and 2. I'll slow right down. First bar. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 3. Now in the second bar, it gets a bit funky. The first bass drum in the second bar is on the and of beat 1 in between the hi-hats. So now I'll play the first bar with all of the bass drums and the second bar with just the first bass drum. 1, 2, 3, and I'll slow right down. 1, 3, 4, even slower. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3. Okay, now on the second bar, there's also 3 and, like there was in the first bar, and there's also one right at the end, like there was in the first bar. So now I'm going to play the whole thing. I'll go really slow, and I'll just loop it, and I'll loop it, and I'll build up. Here we go. 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Okay, I'm going to slow it down. And 4, and 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. Watch out for those ones in the gap. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Here's the top. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. One last time. 1, and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's speed it up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 Like I said, there's other variations as well. Perhaps I'll do a playthrough of it and a talk through of it some other time. But that's the main groove, man. Like I say, just for grade 1, just perfect. I think if you're just sort of getting going and you've got some basic quarter note beats down, this just takes it that little bit further from like the initial sort of level into grade 1 with those sort of in between the hi-hat bass drums. And it's just a great little musical phrase, isn't it? A great tune as well. There's a drum fill at the start, which is a bit of fun. It goes. So if you count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the drummer literally counts in at the start of the song, which is quite helpful. If you listen to the original, he goes 1, 2, 1, 2. The first snare drum hit is on beat 3. The bass drum is on the and of beat 3, and the snare drum is on the and of beat 4, just before the groove lands. So 1, 2 starts on 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's run that fill a couple of times. 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Even slower. 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And something like full speed. 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3. Second time round, there's a little bit of funky James Brown. Again here, I think. Like I say, we'll get to that another time, but just the main groove. Kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick. I think the trickiest bit for the grade 1 drummer is the end of the first bar and the beginning of the second, because they're on the ands, on the off beats, right? So just that little introduction to the sort of playing on the offbeat a little bit more syncopated, a little bit more funky than the basic grooves you'd hit like at the initial grade, I reckon. Hope that all makes a bit of sense. Like I say, shout out to Gary. Great song suggestion. Like I say, I think another time I'll do a full playthrough and a full talk through. But there we go, man. Hopefully that's useful. As usual, over on the channel members page, you'll get the notation for that. You can download, print out, look on your screen. You also get the practice along version where I'll type it into the shout out to, as ever, the amazing Mike Johnson. For his Groove Scribe software, I type it into the Groove Scribe software, and there you can play along with it. You can slow it right down. You can see it on the screen as you play. It's a beautiful way to build up amazing bit of software. As ever, shout out to him for making that readily available. So I type it into that as well. Over on the channel members page as usual. And shout out to Gary. Did I say that already? Yes, I did. Thanks a million for watching. Really appreciate it. Please like, share and subscribe if you found these videos useful, helpful, feel positive about them, and you're in a position to and would like to, please consider supporting this channel. You can do that via my Buy Me a Coffee page, by either buying me a coffee. Thanks a million to all the lovely people who do that. I'm so glad if you found these videos useful, or becoming a channel member, an incredible way to support the channel if that's of interest to you. And you get a whole load of things in return for that on an ongoing basis. You're supporting the channel at £10 a month, but you get a whole lot of things in return, including a complimentary practice plan, a complimentary Zoom session, your practice plan updated for you as you progress, priority suggestions for future videos on the channel, like Gary here, and then a whole load of other features, including breakdowns of the drum covers that I put up, like I said earlier, notation and practice along versions for the tutorial type of videos, and ongoing drum support. I'm on hand. I'll email you back, give you video responses, give you feedback on your practice videos, and update your practice plan for you as you progress, and we'll just work together on the whole thing. Thanks for watching as always. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. See you soon.